I love you, you skinny Hebrew.
Hello, everybody. This is a special in-depth discussion on the day the clown cried with experts such as yours truly, Kayley, Anthony, who works in the film industry, and Richard Raber and Naomi Bishops, who are documentary filmmakers for Traces Films. We will also discuss Richard and Naomi's interaction with Jerry Lewis for their unfinished documentary, Clown, which took them on a roller coaster ride for years with Jerry. Me and Anthony also will describe our personal experiences and thoughts on the project. You'll want to watch this entire episode to hear information on the day the clown cried that you won't hear elsewhere. So, Richard, how did you come to decide to interview Jerry for the day the clown cried?
Well, first I have to say the reason Nemi's here is because we both were on that journey together, because we run a documentary production company together, Traces Films, and we embarked on this crazy Jerry journey together. I've kind of carried it on further beyond since it kind of died. I'm still carrying it on in the form of writing a book, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, but we both kind of latched onto it together. Started, I think, with us just doing quite a random late night internet dive into all sorts of things and discovering the day the clown cried. And I think I'd heard about it years earlier from a friend of mine, and was vaguely intrigued by it, but I hadn't done any deep dive into it really. And then it came up again. It was probably 2010, and at the time we saw all the usual articles that were the most prominent articles, like the famous, the famous Spy magazine article where there's 7 or 8 people talking about their recollections. And yeah, and then, I don't know, I think we were just instantly we
were captivated pretty much straight away. We were like, how could we make a doco about this? And how could we get in touch with Jerry? I mean, the chance of us getting in touch with him was so remote, but it was clearly meant to be because.
Yeah, because we actually thought there's no way we would be able to get in touch with him because being just 2 filmmakers, bubs.
Anyway, a friend of Richard's was writing a magazine for the kind of an area where in Melbourne there's a casino and a lot of well-known people come and perform there. So Jerry had come and she'd actually done an interview with him, and she was a major fan. She'd grown up with his films. So she had contact details for him, and they'd really got on quite well. Was a straight shooter, and so they had an amazing interview. He was really great with her, not so moody, and so she had a contact number with the guy who was the Australian representative for the Muscular Dystrophy Foundation, and also Jerry had a Australian manager who lived in Queensland, and so she had the details for him as well. Guy called Joe Serantonio. Lou, sorry. So we were at a party and Richard was telling her about this documentary, and she just happened to say, well.
Oh, it was amazing. It was such a crazy moment where she said to me, I can get you in touch with Jerry Lewis. And I was in shock. Absolute shock, because this was only, I think you mention, it was only a couple of weeks after we discovered this story, and we're like, oh, how could we do this? How could we get in touch with Jerry Lewis? And then suddenly there's this old school friend of mine telling me, here it is, this opportunity. So it was it very much felt like it was meant to be, and there was a destiny attached to it, and it felt very powerful, and we jumped on it. We jumped on it, and
we wrote an email. We actually wrote an email and we sent it to the muscular dystrophy guy, and he passed it on through Jerry's son to Jerry. And then we didn't hear anything, and then out of the blue you got a call. Was it the call first or an email?
I think it was No,
yes.
first there was an email.
email.
First there was an email from Jerry directly in capital letters. So he was screaming and he was saying, "There's nothing to discuss." That's all he wrote. One line. There's nothing to discuss. And as soon as we saw that email, we just thought, yeah, we kind of knew that would be the case. We knew how sensitive he was to the whole Clown Cried, saga. So we kind of thought, yeah, that's kind of what we expected, and that's it. We'll have to move on now. Except we couldn't move on because I was in a playground with my son, who was 4 or 5, just starting kindergarten. It was like a gathering. And my phone rings, and it's Jerry Lewis ringing me on my mobile phone. And, and I just tried really hard to stay really cool, and he said, "Is this Richard Raber?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "This is Jerry Lewis." He goes, "I'm about to read you an email that I've just sent you." And I said, "Okay." And he said, so he starts reading out this email that he's obviously just sent, not the email I mentioned to you before, which is a new one, a follow-up email. And what was in the email? That was him saying,
again, nothing.
There's nothing to discuss. Oh yeah, leave me alone.
Leave me alone.
I told you there's nothing to discuss. Leave me alone. As if we'd been badgering him since the first email, which we hadn't. We hadn't. I don't think we even wrote back to him. So it was him. He was obviously playing games and testing us and whatever. And I started defending myself. We're not pursuing it. And as I'm talking, he starts talking over me like this standover tactic gangster, going, listen to me, just listen to what I'm saying, listen to me. And I'm like, I'm listening. What? And he goes, are we clear? Do we understand each other? And I said, yes. And he goes, and it was very close to New Year. And he said, Happy New Year to you, Richard. And he hung up, and that was it. then you ring me because you got the email. Or I rang you.
Then there's an email,
which is the one he was writing.
Yes, which was the one, there's nothing to discuss. And then a day or two later, we see in our emails an email from Jerry saying, change of heart.
Third email.
So we're like, well, okay, what gives, right? This is really bizarre. To the point where I actually thought, is this really Jerry Lewis or someone like, is this a joke? It was bizarre. Anyway, this whole thing about it's a change of heart.
And a phone number.
Please call me. So we're like, okay, this is really weird. So we schedule a time, we call him.
We tape recorded it too.
And then we get kind, emotional Jerry on the phone. Soft Jerry.
Soft, apologetic Jerry, yeah.
And he says, had a change of heart. The minute I got your letter, I scrunched it up. He apologised.
Huge apology.
Yes.
Like, I'm
sorry. And then he said, when I got your letter, I threw it out straight away into the bin. But Lou, who is the manager, was the Queensland manager, says, Jerry, maybe it's time to heal this whole time of your life, this film and what happened. Why don't you have a look at this letter? So he did, and he was open to us doing something.
We should explain maybe the gist of our initial letter to him was the angle we took was we made an assumption that what Jerry was trying to do with The Day the Clown Cried was something very significant. It was, something serious. After all that comedy, it was something close to his heart because it was Jewish related. There was the Jewish angle, there was the humanitarian angle, there was the children's, obviously Save the Children kind of angle, because we all know how important kids are to him with the whole muscular, all of that, the telethon, everything. So we kind of took it as, because all the stuff that we'd seen on the internet obviously was negative, and a lot of it was negative, obviously, and smearing him and making fun of him and mocking him, as and we thought, no, he must have been trying to do something really important, but something misfired and something went wrong, or as we all know, many things went wrong. But and we thought we want him to tell this story, and we want to uncover, and also just to sort of get to the bottom of something that was obviously a positive, what we assumed was a very positive motivation for him and reasons for doing it, and a legacy for him, rather than a legacy being these nasty things on the internet, about Jerry goes to death camp and all those tacky titles that a lot of those critical articles had yet. So we thought, so we really, that was what we, from that first letter right through, and there were many more letters and faxes and emails and over the next couple of years, they all had that same, really the same core message of that what we wanted to make for him was, and for ourselves, but for him, a legacy, and just give him a voice to, to really explain what had happened. So,
but I think it became really apparent to us what a hornet's nest it actually was for him, and how he clearly hadn't resolved it in any way emotionally. And so, and I think he was just mercurial anyway as a person, and his moods would do this. So we just found ourselves on the receiving end of his changeable moods, which was kind of interesting, because after a while we actually didn't give a shit. We just were like, yeah, okay. Do you know what? At first we were like Jerry Lewis, because we also grew up with him.
Yeah.
His comedies were played here midday. All my friends have memories of him growing up, seeing his movies. Anyway.
Yeah.
So he wanted to see a reel of ours. We sent him our work. We heard back from him not long after.
Yeah, there was a bit of a delay.
Yeah, there was a delay because he wanted a physical tape or whatever it was that we sent to him. And he liked our work. And so he was like,
he agreed to meet with us.
I'm happy to meet with you. I'll be in Australia. I'll be in Melbourne. So we were like, great, okay. So there was a meeting scheduled, and we bought like a babka cake. I don't know if you guys know what a babka is. It's like a a kugelhof, like it's a classic Eastern European Jewish cake. And
I know it from Seinfeld. There's like a whole
yeah, of course. And we were under a very naive impression that when we met him, it would just be us and him.
Like an intimate
discussion.
Conversation. Little did we know.
So we're ushered into this massive hotel room with loads of people.
And a full-on entourage.
All men. No,
there was one.
I don't remember.
There was one.
And he's sitting there in this chair with his slippers on, those monogram slippers. And we're like, they usher us up to him like he's royalty, and they said, Jerry, this is Naomi, and because Naomi's my real name.
It was actually funny. I'm going to tell.
And we hand over Jerry, this is for you, and we hand him the box. And he shakes it. It's Jerry Lewis character, and it was like, wow, okay.
In that voice, the silly voice.
It was kind of odd, actually.
It was so out of context as well. Yeah, it was weird. And then he dropped it and became normal kind of serious Jerry again. Then we sauntered over to that was kind of in the corner where there was an executive desk. Then we move over to the big couch, but there's all this crap on the couch, like, I don't know what, magazines or stuff. Mm-hmm. And we start moving, clearing the couch, right? And then Jerry, this is such classic Jerry humor. He goes, clear the couch for them. He screams at his entourage, clear the fucking couch for these guys. He was like embarrassed that the couch was not ready for us to sit on. It was very funny. And we finally sat, and
he's got the TV blaring in the background, and there's all these men watching, and someone's taking photos. And it's right. Like, what is going on? And then he sits on the ottoman, and he delves into a whole conversation, which felt like hours, but it was literally probably about 15 minutes.
Half an hour, Dad.
And
we had half an hour.
He proceeds to tell us how this is never going to happen, why he brought us in there to tell us it was never going to happen. We've got, but I think that was all part of it. It was his push-pull thing of, I want this, but I don't want it. And I mean...
Testing.
He was testing us, and he said, no amount of money in the Bank of Israel is going to make this movie. And we were like, okay. So then he goes, I know who you are. I was there. I was once where you are. I know who you are. I know you better than you know yourself.
And I know, what do you say? I know how hungry you are. How hungry you are for this,
And he goes, he said, you know how many people have made films about me, and I've got that many requests to make docos, and then he goes, but you could do, and it starts telling us what kind of film we could make, and we were like, well, why would we do that when you've already done that? Like, it's
first I said to him when he started with all that negative stuff, like, this is never going to happen and blah blah, I said to him, what? All right, so why are we here? Why have you invited us here?
Yeah.
I said that straight out, and he said a silly response, like he said, well, my parents taught me good manners, and that's why you're here, and that's why I've invited you. And, but then later, later on, that's right. So he mentioned, you could do another doco not focusing on the day the clown cried, and we just said, look, yeah.
There's no point. Like,
you've got other people doing other because the Method to the Madness documentary was being made at the time, and maybe possibly one other, I don't know, but according to him, there was more than one being made. We said, no, I mean, what we're interested in the day the clown cried, and what that's right. Early on, we said something like, or you said something like, we're interested in the courage of the artist, and to pursue,
he goes, what courage? Does it take courage to save children from a burning house? I mean, it was all, sometimes he would just lapse into kind of nonsensical monologue. It was like, okay, we were just sitting there, but we didn't back down. And I think he liked that. We didn't cower. We were just like, okay, well, Jerry, if you, sorry, we're going to say.
I think like your first, like not pressing him right away is why he like kept coming back. And that's I think because so many people would just be like, well, why are you not wanting to do this, or like press more into it? And he liked that you kind of weren't gonna take his crap basically. But didn't show it, like you were strong about it, and weren't going to be run over. He does a lot of testing people, I say, to like see their reactions, and it's in a good way. I don't think it's in a malicious way, but I think he's just had so many negative experiences with people that he has to be testy sometimes. So so what else happened after?
I think he got with his life, I think he would have had so many yes people, just constantly kind of doing what he wanted, and I think that's why he tested people too. He wanted to see who they really were, what they were made of, and that's what it felt like. So look, we just held our ground, and eventually at the end he said, send me something and I'll read it on the plane.
We had it. We
had a document. He goes, let me read it on the plane and I'll get back to you. So we were like, okay. So as we walked out, Lou, who was the manager, gave us a look of, oh, good on you. You actually held your ground. And then the other guy, the muscular dystrophy guy who walked us to the elevator, said, you have no idea how well you just did, because, he's watched many other 30-minute meetings that really didn't go that well, where Jerry's demolished someone.
I'm sure many a time.
So he said, you did really well to turn him around, in that short time and whatever. And he said, just keep in touch, whatever. But look, the rest of it is a really long story. But I mean, to cut to the next chapter quickly, after many back and forth and him umming and ahhing and yes and no, and he eventually agreed for us to come to Las Vegas to meet him and spend a couple of days. And it was never fully just, confirmed that we were coming and beginning to film him. It was just agreed that we were coming to meet him. So we actually did not even turn up with camera gear.
We did have gear. We just didn't on the first meeting. We just turned up to...
No, we hired.
Did we bring our own camera?
No.
Oh, God, this is how long ago it was. So we turned up at his office with just us. And we had our baby. He was like 3 months old. And that really softened him. I think it was, not on purpose on our part, but I think it was a great prop because it actually softened him straight away, and he loved babies. So we walked in though, and his son was there with his 2 granddaughters.
Which son is it again? Chris.
And he says, "You're late." And we're like, oh no, it's angry Jerry.
Angry evil Jerry.
Evil Jerry's back. And so we were told to come at 2, and he went, oh, I'm sorry. So they left. Yeah, that's right. And then we sat with him, and it was lovely.
Couple of hours.
He was very honest, very raw, actually, very vulnerable. He talked about how he was done over by the producer, how humiliating it was, how he had to try and raise the money, how he had to keep it from the crew, what was going on.
We should also, can I just say also,
Yeah.
one of the first things that happened in that, when we finally when the Chris left and the grandchildren left, and we're sitting there just with Jerry, and the really weird thing that happened initially was that he started talking to us about, do you remember? He started talking as if what we were there to discuss was reviving The Day the Clown Cried, not a documentary about The Day the Clown Cried, but actually, and it was so obvious when we look back on it, that that's really what he wanted. It's what he always wanted. He always wanted to rescue it and improve it and finish it and get it out there. And, you know, and because he was getting old, and there must have been some level of just some kind of dementia, I reckon.
Yeah.
He was confusing things, and, you know, and he kind of thought, and we had to sort of say, listen, that's not really what we're doing or planning to do. And he kind of went, oh yeah, and he, you know, and he was back on track. But in that conversation, then 2 days later, we came back with camera gear and sound gear, and because he said, yeah, let's do this, let's start the process, and we started the interview. So on that day and the initial day, the other sign of dementia was that he really jumped around time frames a lot. Remember? Yeah. He confused time frames. He got things wrong that we felt not comfortable to correct him on, you know, like years of this that was obviously not correct, but we didn't want to say anything. But look, he did start really getting into it, getting into the story and telling us and it was so obviously such a traumatic part of his life, full on. And the last thing he says on tape that we've got is, I'm starting to feel nauseous. Like,
just thinking
it was
about
too
it.
much.
It was too much.
It was too much for him. And I think, yeah, look, then the plan was, you know, when we left Vegas, we were on a real high, because what he'd said to us was, yeah, come back, we'll organise for you to come back and do an extended interview, and we'll just get this ball rolling. And he goes, I fully trust you, and I fully am happy to give you everything you want. I've got lots of archival material, and we were just on a real high. But things didn't turn out that way.
No, we cut the little trailer, which you've seen, I assume. And it was just, I think it was too confronting for him, and he didn't like it. He was really confronted by it and uncomfortable, and he started pulling rank as a filmmaker. And
he goes, I'd like to get in the editing room with that trailer, you know.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was too much. And then we'd lost him. Then he was kind of, he was gone for a while. And we managed after that time.
We revived
it again.
It was dead and revived about 2 or 3 more times over the next really 3 years, I think, right up to about a year before he died.
So even after Dirt Clown had come out?
No, when that came out, when we discovered that had been made, he had done his kind of another "No Way It's Over" with us, like a fax in capital letters. And then, so no, but it was hard for us to even though that the German documentary was made, it was still difficult for us to fully give up. We felt betrayed and hurt that he'd done it. I don't know. Having said that, the more I saw and learned about that doc, I realized it was so much what we had been asking of him, you know, for what we would plan for our documentary was, I think, way more in depth and probably too difficult. Too much for him. Because we were talking about, you know, a couple of weeks of conversations, recording them with him, which was probably, in hindsight, was just too huge. We knew it was actually based on something he said to us, which was, you know, you're going to need 30 hours of me talking. He says it in the trailer.
But also, as this spanned over a long period of time, he was getting older. So he was getting older. less clear about things in his head.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, yeah, so eventually it was just, we realized it was kind of a lost cause, wasn't going to go, wasn't going to happen. I think
that amount of time on him would have been really cranky for sure.
I think so, yeah. And I think that with the German doc, I kind of worked out, I probably just had him in for a couple of hours and that was it, and see you later. And he probably saw that as an opportunity. Oh, I can kind of immortalize this documentary somehow. The clown, you know, the Day of the Clown Cried, in the form of this doco. So I'll agree to this, and I came and went and did that. But so yeah, it didn't happen for us. Well, that's our story basically.
God, we've forgotten a lot.
There's a lot more detail in there, obviously, and there's people that we spoke to along the way as well and got their input, and so we can. Yeah, I don't know if you want to. Other people, if Anthony wants to talk, or
I wanted to say, first of all, I think also Jerry had wanted to do a documentary and private recordings of on the day the clown cried. Like, he had mentioned that he had no other opportunity perhaps than to do it in a documentary, because he just couldn't see his way legally by releasing the film, basically. So he was like looking into it legally and through lawyers to see how he would be able to release it in any way he could, but he really wanted to release it anyway. And he said that if I have to do it through a documentary, that sounds like something that would interest me. And when I heard that, I was like, I definitely thought that, I bet he had a hand in doing something with Drew Clown, and he had released certain things to them as well with footage, because he held the last 3 days of footage, which included the last scene, and that was something that Europa Studios wouldn't have had. That supposedly, unless I'm mistaken. But
yeah, no, I think he took the negatives, he smuggled the negatives back to the United States, according to his production manager, Mike Ramirza, who I spoke to. He said that they had 100 Louis Vuitton bags that they smuggled the footage in back to America. It was most terrifying through customs, and worrying that one of the producers was going to show up at the airport and accuse him of stealing. So it's true. And to your point, Kayley, about him wanting to release Day the Clown Cried, I think the only way he could have legally was through a documentary, because of the way that the rights were divided. The underlying rights to the original story were with the original writers of the film and their estate. And they sold the rights to their original script to, I can't remember exactly who, but there was an Israeli producer and then somebody else who owned the rights to it. So I don't think he could have ever really technically released his footage legally as a complete film.
No.
Other than doing it in the form of a documentary. I think that would be the only way. So to your point, Kayley, I think you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, it was the Jeff Abramoff guy. That's the
Jack Abramoff.
Jack,
yeah, I believe he owns half the rights to it. I think, and then there's a rabbi who I think is a quasi film producer. I'm not even kidding. Owns the rights to the original script, and had hoped to remake it. I believe, Kayley, you probably know this better than I do. I think William Hurt,
Yeah,
was going to play the Jerry Lewis role.
Point, yeah. Several actors were. I think Robin Williams as well.
And Richard Burton randomly.
Yeah. Right. So it's got quite a saga.
Yeah. Also, the thing about that German documentary was because I got a bit obsessed with trying to find out as much as I could about it, because it ended up being quite an obscure film in the end, because it was screened once, apparently.
Yes.
From what I read, it screened once late at night in Germany and was never screened again. And I remember finding a German review about it, and I tried to get I'd used Google Translate, and I got a rough translation of what the review said. And in that review, they were kind of they were working out, it was I think it was conjecture maybe, but they were trying to work out why the film, is not going to really, it didn't seem like it was going to get another viewing or broadcast. Yeah. And they thought it was it must have been to do with the fact that Jerry probably didn't have the rights to give them that much footage that they ended, because they used a lot of that original film footage in the documentary.
Right.
And that, he didn't have the rights to do it, and that maybe there were warnings, or, as soon as it aired, there was, I don't know.
Right.
Well, like legal. Germany, like they're allowed, Germany is like allowed to, I don't know what exactly are the legalities there, but they're allowed to show certain things without copyright thing that they kind of exist.
And it's all dubbed too. Like all the footage is dubbed over in German too. So that could be one of the reasons why.
Yeah. I mean, their own bubble.
Right.
Bubble stuff.
Yeah.
Not to get too far into the conversation. I know that we may want to save this for a little later, but I think that part of the reason why the film will never be seen in its entirety, just from, according to the people that I had spoken to, is that pieces of the film, or at least pieces of the rights to the film, belong to so many different places. So Jerry and his estate own the rights to a part of it. Europa Film, which has been absorbed by a different company, now has certain rights and has certain footage. There's a French film company that has certain bits of it too. And then there's, Waxberger and Kortchak, and there's so many people who are involved in this thing and put money into this thing. And interestingly, I think it was Mike Ramersa who told me, and Mike was the production manager on the film. Just a side note about Mike's father, I can't remember his first name, maybe Tommy Ramersa, was Jerry's drummer for many years. And Tommy died, and Mike was, left a father and sort of in dire circumstances. And Jerry sort of adopted Mike and gave him some jobs on his films, and one of them was The Day the Clown Cried. So he and his fiance worked on The Day the Clown Cried and became like his right hand people on the production. And what was the point that I was making? Oh, according to Mike, in talking to Jerry, it was his belief that the producer Nat Waxberger had promised the French government that if they put up half the money for the film, that Jerry would shoot the entire film in France. And then Waxberger went to Sweden and to the Swedish government and said, if you put up half the money, we'll shoot the entire thing in Sweden. So he had made two promises to two different countries who thought that they were putting up half the money and the film was going to be made completely in those countries. And come to find out that he lied to both of them. So some of it was filmed in France, some of it was filmed in Sweden. So, again, I think it gets pretty deep. And I don't know if anybody in the Swedish government or the French government today care about that, but, it's hard to say. So I mean, I can't imagine that in any way, shape, or form, because of the rights, because of just the difficulty in putting all of this together, that anybody could really reasonably put all those pieces together to get this released as, I mean, even if you had all the footage, even if you were somewhere miraculously find all the footage, put it together, I can't see that being a possibility. Anyway, I didn't want to deviate into that too much, but we kind of talked about that. So wanted to bring that in.
So maybe,
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
You just spend a fortune in legal fees just trying to get the rights from all those different places. It would be an absolute nightmare.
It wouldn't be possible. I can't see it happening.
No.
Not let alone, I mean, I don't know what I mean, people claim to have seen bits and pieces of it or a whole cut of it. And it's hard to say what has been seen by who. So even that is incredibly confusing. You don't know who to believe. And Kayley, I mean, you know that, what is it, a university that Jerry donated footage to, said that they were going to release it at some point, and that's all.
Library of Congress.
Yeah, Library of Congress.
Yeah.
Right. And that, I mean, that footage is all without sound. It's all mute, correct?
And then, yes. And so, well, the film like the sound part was like completely damaged, according to his son, Chris. And they don't even have the complete footage. So they just have a bunch of behind the scenes footage, like extras, like takes from the film, and basically everything in Der Clown is what Jerry had and gave them. Now he probably, I'm assuming he kept a lot back somewhere, but where? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think
I'm not sure.
So like he had the doubles, he had all the copies that Europa had. So and
I don't think he had the originals of those. I think that he had copies of those, and then he had the original negatives of the last 3 days, I believe, of shooting. That's what they smuggled back to America. Like, you'll never finish the movie without the last 3 reels.
So I'm assuming like. So that footage he had alone, and Europa didn't. So how did the Der Clown documentary guy, like how did they get that end footage with Jerry leading the children into the gas chamber? Is my question.
I mean, I think that it all came from. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think didn't all that footage come from Jerry?
No,
for Der Clown.
So. According to the documentary, this one guy who was helping clean out, he was a worker at Europa. They were doing like a spring cleaning. They dumped out a bunch of stuff. They dumped out Jerry's, I think it was like at least 2 to 3 reels or so that they just dumped that are lost now. And he saw a bunch of stuff in the garbage, and so he saw that they were labeled The Day the Clown Cried. He pulled them out, he saved them for a while. This was in the 80s. But also interesting is Europa had also planned to I guess edit together the negative, which I'm assuming they probably did, since people have seen all this footage on a videotape somewhere. I think they're the ones who edited the footage together, and then they had planned to release it to European film distributors, but Joan O'Brien stopped them.
Yeah.
So that's how she put it.
Interesting story about that from Charles Denton's son, who I spoke to, who was I told this to Kayley. He was very cautious to speak to me. Didn't want to reveal much, about anything. And he said, I have a feeling what you're going to do is going to praise Jerry and make him into a hero. And he said, I don't want to do that. I said, well, I don't really have an angle yet. I said, after talking to you and to other people, I'll shape, how Jerry appears in the project that I was working on, and I hope to continue to work on. But I said, I have no angle right now. I'd love to just hear what you experience. I mean, what your parents experienced, and, just to, hear their perspective. And he said, well, he didn't have a great memory as to what his father and what Joan O'Brien had went through. But he said he had remembered that several years after shooting the film, that Jerry had screened a cut for Joan and for Charles Denton, for his father. And they were pretty horrified with what they saw. They were very, very upset. And I mean, they in general, they were upset because from their perspective, at least according to his son, they never released the rights to, or optioned the rights to Waxberger or to Jerry. They did. I mean, Jerry had no legal right to make the film, so they were very upset to begin with. And then after seeing the film, they were very appalled. And Jerry, I think at the time, because this was several years later, was trying to get permission from them to complete the film. And they saw it. They said absolutely not. And according to Denton's son, Jerry got on his knees and begged them and said, please, please. I was on Percodan and, pulled out all the stops of, trying to truly, and they refused. They refused to do it. And I mean, they really, truly, Charles Denton was always very, very upset with Jerry, as was Joan O'Brien, because they felt like they had created this beautiful story, this monumental piece that could have just been the greatest film ever made. And when Jerry came in, that they felt that he ruined what could have potentially been something great. Joan and Charles, they weren't screenwriters. They were, I think, publicists. They had never written a screenplay before. And they both, in their later years, had financial troubles and needed to sell the rights to the script. And I think that they had hoped that something would have been made, from this film that they cherished and thought it was beautiful, but unfortunately it's become the butt of everybody's jokes. So anyway,
did Denton's son articulate what it was about the film they didn't like?
Well, I think, Kayley has a pretty good idea of that as well. I know Jerry changed the name of the main character from, that was a big thing that I think that they disliked, from Carl Schmidt to Helmut Dork.
Yeah.
That was something that bothered them. I think that there's some information in the Spy magazine article, if I'm not mistaken, Kayley, where they interview Joan, and she was specific about what she disliked about the film.
Yeah, like she said that he changed the character from being German to Jewish. There's no reference to Jerry's character being Jewish in the movie or the script or anything. So that was just weird. I mean, unless they're just taking into the consideration that Jerry himself is Jewish. I don't know where they got that assumption, but then also they had a problem with it being Chaplin-esque, which I wouldn't consider this him really going into Chaplin material here or pathos. It's that I would say was more like Which Way to the Front, honestly.
I think that just the fact that Jerry was introducing comedic elements at all into it was sort of bothersome to them. Denton's son wasn't specific. His memory was sort of vague, because he wasn't really the one involved in it. And I don't think he even really knew Joan O'Brien. But yeah, I think just the very fact that Jerry was adding clowning elements in the concentration camp was something that was partially what bothered them about it. But other than that specifically, I don't know.
I think also what I read was that one of the major things he did to the character was that the initial character in their script was actually not likable in the least.
Right.
Like a very dark and bitter character. And Jerry made it more schmaltzy and more likable, and the comedic more sympathetic, and the more comedic elements and a more likable character, which of course probably, if you think about Jerry Lewis himself, he probably was thinking it was probably too challenging for him to portray a character that's not likable, because if you look at his own psychology, Jerry loved being loved, loved being liked.
Remember that one character in The Family Jewels where he's the unlikable clown, Uncle Everett. I mean, he could have. True,
but that's a very but in the Clown Cried, it's a different context because it's a
Right.
serious, dark film. But look, the other thing is that he revealed something I think he revealed something connected to us in the conversation, and I think he said it to us off camera in the first meeting, not in the recorded conversation, but he said something like, I got in the way of the film.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Meaning my ego got in the way of the film. And that, I think that's the most significant thing he ever said to us about it, about what, if you were to distill what went wrong in the movie, and there were many things that went wrong, that from his drug habit to financial stuff, but that seemed like a big thing when he said that. And
and he didn't blame anyone else either for the failure.
But that's odd. I mean, to me, that's odd because, you know, just from looking at the history of what happened and just the difficulties that came about because of the producers on the film and you know, the deceit, it really wasn't his fault. And not enough people have seen the film to even say that it would have been a disaster. I mean, some people have claimed to have seen bits and pieces of it, but nobody's seen a complete finished product of it. So that's interesting to me that he put the blame on himself when really I don't think he was the one to blame at all. I think he was deceived by all the people that were involved in it, you know, from, you know, I mean, especially the producers of the film. It's a shame that he took that burden on himself, but
he also said to us that he was ashamed of the work.
Right. I can't understand that. I mean, from what I've seen of it, it looks like a very interesting movie. I wouldn't say that it's the worst thing that I've ever seen, but you know.
He also
sorry, I'm
said
gonna have
that,
to stop one.
We can keep going.
Oh, he also says that in Der Clown that he was ashamed immediately of the work, but then why keep going and keep wanting to like release it? Up until like 1993, he was talking about releasing this film on the Whoopi Goldberg show. He did an interview with her, and he was like, I'm going to like film a few more scenes and like somehow we'll get this released. He kept saying that like for, you know, all these years. Like, so I know at some point he just got tired and, you know, just like had enough, but I don't think it was a right away decision, like he says in Der Clown, that he was ashamed immediately of the work, because like why would you put so much effort into telling people that it's going to be released and you need to film a few more scenes. Also, I in watching Der Clown, like I wondered why Jerry left. Like there's like apparently there was like 3 to 4 more days of shooting and he just up and left.
Yeah.
So
I speaking to Mike and to Rune, who was the assistant director on the film, I think it came down to financial reasons primarily. I mean, I have to look back at my notes and see specifically what they said, but there was a period where there was a lot of hostility, and Europa had put up, a huge amount of money, and they weren't going to put up any more. I think Jerry had to finance the last few scenes of it or something like that. But there was a big fight between Waxberger and Kortschenk, who was another producer on it, and Jerry, as to, you know, you promised this, and, you know, this didn't happen. And but Jerry was adamant to finish it. I mean, he may have even sold some properties or something to be able to finish, you know, the last few days of shooting. But I believe he financed it himself. But it was really a difficult process. Mike Ramirez remembered, and Rune remembered, both, you know, together, that during that period, and especially towards the end of shooting, Mike's wife, Rune, and Fred Skidmore, who was Jerry's publicist, would congregate together every night after they would wrap shooting at Jerry's villa. And Rune, Mike's wife, Rune, and Fred Skidmore, who was Jerry's publicist, would congregate together every night after they would wrap shooting at Jerry's villa. And Jerry I believe Mike called them the Four Musketeers. I don't know if that's just in hindsight or they called each other that during the time, but they were really the Four Musketeers that were supporting Jerry, and truly the only people who were on Jerry's side during that time, because all the forces of, all these studios, and Europa actually was fairly supportive of Jerry as much as they could be, but it was really that core team of four people who were really, had Jerry's best interest and were trying to help him finish it, despite all the negative things that were happening, behind the scenes.
I mean, I think so it sounds like he just had like maybe reshoots that he had left, because he says several times that the last scene that he shot that was left in the whole process was the final gas chamber scene.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, and then like he sounds like he completed the film, but then other times like they're like he didn't complete it, but I'm thinking those were just like reshoots. Like he kept saying that he had like 3 to 4 scenes that needed to be shot. So I don't know.
Well, Richard will know this better than anybody. Is that when you look at a rough cut of a film, then you usually see where things that you need to reshoot and things that just don't work, and things that are missing. So it's possible that he just wanted to reshoot certain parts of it, or he saw things that were missing. I actually do have, and I would be happy to read this to you, but Rune, who's the assistant director on the film, he outlined the last scene of the film, and he gave me a whole written summary of his memory of it, and I'd be happy to read that for you if you'd be interested in hearing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Let's see. Okay, we spent Monday preparing to restart shooting on Tuesday. So this is after that period where they took some time off. We filmed the last remaining scenes. On the last day, only remaining was the scene mentioned above, the children's march to the entrance door of the gas chamber led by Helmut Dork. Jerry had chosen a very sublime orchestral intermezzo from a Wagner opera, which was to be played while the cameras were rolling. After long, careful, tense preparations, we were finally ready to roll on a beautiful early June summer day afternoon. And I called music, camera, action. Tears were filling the eyes of everybody behind the cameras as we saw a row of children in Helmut. It was a rather long take as I remember it. We were all in tears, but also a great sense of relief that we had been able to finish the last scene. Jerry wiped his face, hugged all the children, and the crew asked me to call the limo, and we returned to the villa where I'd been staying with him the whole time. So there you go. Memorable last scene of the film.
Yeah.
And he couldn't move, like when he was preparing to film that final scene, like he was like frozen there, and he was just so overwhelmed with everything that had happened to him during the production, and like he had only been getting 3 hours sleep for like 100 and something days, 113 days or something. Like that's wild. But like it's weird that he would just like not tell anybody that he was leaving, like with everything, like because they thought, hey, we have like 3 to 4 days shooting, they had everything planned. He just disappears. So they just they were kind of caught off guard by that, and really confused. So I just wonder why he didn't tell them anything there.
I think there's a lot of difficulty behind the scenes and things that I think he was probably embarrassed to admit to the crew, especially that they weren't getting paid. I mean, I don't think any of these people were ever paid, to make this film. So, honestly, according to the people that I've spoke to, there was no resentment at all. They just wanted to see this movie made. They loved Jerry. The cast and the crew adored him, and they had a great time making it too. I mean, Jerry, the first day of shooting, came on the set and he knew every single person's name. And I'm telling you, these names are incredibly confusing. They're all Swedish names, the cast and crew. He knew all of their names and could pronounce them perfectly. He really was, and Kayley will know this as well. You know, he had a real spirit of fun on all of his movies, and that carried through in this film as well. So really, I mean, you know, there was no resentment that they weren't paid for this, just sadness that, you know, it was a hard thing to remember years later, that, you know, this could have been a really great film. And these crew members too, you know, they all were very experienced filmmakers. They had worked with Ingmar Bergman on, you know, on many films, and you know, so these were not amateurs. These were, you know, total professionals. And the fact that they were working with Jerry Lewis meant a lot to them. And it's just a shame that these you know, these people can't have their names, you know, out there and have the film to hold you know, up as something to be proud of. And it's become the butt of a joke. And you know, I'm hoping that through things like this, and you know, hopefully there will be other projects, books, other documentaries that you know, we can finally have some respect paid to Jerry and to these people for doing all this hard work. It's hard work making a movie, you know, any movie. So it's I hope that does come one day.
And also, I think the question of the quality of the film is the big question, isn't it? Because from rumors that it's horrible to a masterpiece, and you know, and everything in between it. And we had an opportunity to speak with the French film critic Jean-Michel Frodon, who wrote that essay in that very obscure film textbook. And you probably know that he framed the essay in a really careful way, that he says he dreamed he saw The Day the Clown Cried, because he was actually, and he told me he was concerned about the legal ramifications of admitting that he'd seen an edit of the film. And apparently he got the version of the film he saw was the one that French filmmaker Gianelli, you know about him? I can't remember his first name.
Xavier.
Yeah.
Gianelli, yeah.
Is he an actor or a filmmaker?
He's an actor and a filmmaker.
Both, maybe,
yeah. Director. I think he's a director. He's a director.
Well, anyway, I think he's produced a few things as well, but
director.
I'm pretty sure that. So, you know, Anthony, when you mentioned earlier, is there a finished cut of the film? I think whatever Jean-Michel saw, he described it as pretty much a complete film. I think there was things missing in terms of the audio. Maybe the soundtrack wasn't complete, but there was a start, middle, and a finish in terms of the story and the scenes that he saw. And I don't know if you've read the full essay he wrote, but it's, you know, in trying to work out, was it crap or was it a masterpiece? I mean, he says pretty good things. I mean, he says, firstly, he says it was very misunderstood. Whoever saw it, the few people who saw it really misunderstood it, because in terms of reading a film, they said that Jerry chose to make it, what's the word, quite fairy tale like, in that he's got the kids being housed in a train caboose or something that's kind of been derailed, and it's just sitting in a paddock or something. You know, it wasn't like a straight realistic depiction of Auschwitz or a concentration camp or anything. It was allegorical or fairy tale like, and on purpose. So, which to me sounds like a really interesting film, if we could ever see.
Oh, me too. I mean, it's hard to say. I just spoke with somebody 2 days ago. I was talking to somebody who works in post-production, and he was mentioning to me that a friend of his saw a complete version of the Day the Clown Cried on a videotape, and said it was the worst thing he had ever seen. You know? And it does contradict other people who say it could have been a masterpiece. It's hard to say what anybody is watching and is seeing. But again, I mean, I think that also that you know, European sensibilities of filmmaking are far different than American sensibilities of filmmaking. Right. So, you know, I think, and just looking at the footage that I've seen from Der Clown and elsewhere, it's a very European looking movie. I mean, in the way that it's shot, There's a darkness to it. There's a grittiness to it that you don't see. I mean, it would have been a shock to people in America seeing a Jerry Lewis movie like that. It would have completely. It probably wouldn't have been well received in America.
No.
I can't. But doesn't mean it's not a great film. It's hard to say. I mean, without having seen, and having just seen bits and pieces of it, I'm just so intrigued by it. I mean, good or bad, I'm just, totally enamored by what I have seen of it.
Especially when the guy gets like shot in the head, like people would have been like, whoa, there's blood in a Jerry Lewis movie.
Right.
Just the violence of that moment. And like, Jerry gets beat by the baton and, and then of course.
Yeah. It's interesting, just looking at Jerry's career at that point, I mean, this was early 70s. So, he really was, in a sense, past the prime of his career, and
culturally,
yeah, absolutely. And then he had that resurgence, I think, later on with the King of Comedy. But this was this period of time where it would have been interesting to see him make a movie like this, it would have been something completely different. And I mean, who knows what his career would have been had this film come out and actually been something. But it's a really interesting reinvention, that we'll never see. I really don't think we'll ever see, but we can only imagine and, have our dreams about it. So
there's a classic interview with Goddard where he discusses
yes,
the content of the film, and his response is that it's classic European. Like there's nothing that frightens him in that concept.
That's right. He says it's a beautiful idea.
It's a beautiful idea, and we pondered on that a lot because we just knew that the European sensibility could take that in because there's the history of it. But for Americans, it would have been a shock, as you say.
Oh, they wouldn't have been accepted.
No, not at all. And not Jerry Lewis, who they were used to seeing in a particular way. So, yeah.
Right.
Nothing until like the Holocaust miniseries or like,
that's right.
Was anything shown like that. Going back to Frodon?
Frodon,
the interviewer asked him like was the Holocaust used as a way to redeem this clown? And that was one of the main things that Joan O'Brien and Charles Denton had issue with, that they thought he was redeemed as a not selfish. And then so Frodon, like I said, he's not redeemed at all. He's suffering all the way through, and then he dies. Like, what kind of redemption is that? So it's a very brutal film, and they thought it was very well done, both Giannoli and him.
That's right. Yeah. So I don't know what that version is and where it is, but that they've seen. And I don't
either. I want to see that version. That's the one to see. Yeah, let's find it.
Never know.
Hey, I'll look with you guys. I'll go through an investigation. Let's do it.
Let's talk about my experience with like just the day the clown cried. So like I was captivated from the moment that I read about it, which happened to be in The King of Comedy by Sean Levy. And, from then on, like, I was just interested in, like, finding out all the footage, like the information that I could, and, like, any, like, behind-the-scenes stuff. And, of course, most Jerry Lewis fans, they kind of are like, we can't talk about this. Because Jerry didn't want to talk about it, but then they don't know the other side of it, that yes, he tried to, yes, it's a time in his life that was uncomfortable and painful to him, and that he wanted to forget, but also he fought so hard for so many years for this film to be made. So like, it's just a very complicated, history, and, they just need to realize that. But like, you can't talk to most Jerry Lewis fans without them saying something negative, or like it can't be shown, or we can't talk about this, basically.
Oh my God, they are adamant. They are Nazis. There's some of those.
Like, it's just, I don't even know. Like, even when you post a photo, they're just like, let's not talk about this. You're not allowed, basically. But so the British documentary came out in, was that early 2000?
I think it was 2016. I think it was 2016
or late 2015 or something. That
Something
was
like that.
amazing, with all the new like photos and stuff. Not a whole lot of new information, but my German friend had sent me a video file of the German documentary Der Clown, and I had no idea that it had footage from the day the clown cried. Like, I think like they recorded it when it was shown, and I was sent all the files, and I think I might have been the first person in America to see the footage from the day the clown cried at that point. And when I was just watching like the first scenes, I was like, I just couldn't believe it, because it was just something out of like something surreal. It was finally happening, and you were finally getting to see the footage from the film. And and especially that final scene in the gas chamber, when they're going into the gas chamber, and then they finally close the door on him, and I was just like crying. It was just such an emotional moment for me, because I was like, F you, Harry Shearer. Because it was so, I was just so angry in that moment that everything he said was a lie. And I was proud to like call him out later, after it went viral. So basically, I edited all the scenes from the film, and I did the subtitles, which I didn't know German, so it was hard to like. It was basically a very rough translation that was mostly like the script. So I was just like, oh, this matches what he's saying, by reading lips. And then I would translate a few things, but it wasn't meant to be like a word for word translation, because I couldn't do that back then. It wasn't in the time of Google Translate, where you can just like push the microphone and like translate everything. So, and then I didn't have money for a translator, so I did the best I could. So it was just meant for like a personal project. When I edited the footage together from the documentary, and it was for fellow fans. So I thought it was just going to be in the forum, and I shared with a few people on Tumblr, but I didn't think it was going to go anywhere, until some random person decided, like, messaged me. And so I probably shouldn't have just trusted some random person, I guess, on Tumblr. But so they had an account there, so I just said, okay, please don't share outside to anybody else, because I might get in trouble, I might get sued, who knows. And they did exactly that. They shared to Jeffrey Wells, who was like a he's a Hollywood film critic. I'm not sure if he does both current films and old films, but he, next thing I know, the video has like 16,000 views. I'm like, what has happened here? And then so I looked, I Googled Day the Clown Cried, and all of a sudden it's like everywhere. Footage. And then I went back and I saw that this one guy, it started when this one guy, Jeffrey Wells, had shared it on his site. So I messaged him. I'm like, I'm the person who, compiled this edit and made this edit, and I might get sued if you're like sharing it everywhere. I thought it was going to just be private. And so, he went into this thing. He was kind of rude, actually. He was just basically saying that everybody should see it, no matter what, and we don't care about your feelings. And he was kind of being like a little bit, sarcastic. And like at that point, I was like, just let everybody see it already, whatever. It's out there already. So luckily I didn't have my real name on the account. So, and I had also gotten a message from, I think that's one of the reasons why I looked at my video to see how I was doing, because I had gotten a message from Daniel Noah, who was the director on Max Rose. And he had said, I was like really in shock that he had messaged me, and he had said, I loved the edit, and like, where did you get the footage? And, I'm going to talk to Jerry later today about what I've seen. And I was like, oh my God. Like, Jerry's gonna come sue me or something. Like, I didn't even know what to say. I was like, Daniel Noah? Like, how did he like possibly see this? So, it was after that I knew it was out there. And like a few months later, it got taken down by YouTube, and that was actually from the German documentary instead of anybody else. So I guess since it had appeared in their documentary, they had rights to it somehow. I don't know. Even though they didn't own the footage. So I don't know how that worked. But I got a lot of good feedback, and then still some negative feedback, of course. But a lot of people had changed their mind about the footage. And, a lot of people were like, where's Harry Shearer? He's a liar, basically.
Yeah.
And right after, let me read you what Harry Shearer had said. Okay, so he wrote on the Variety website, because the footage went viral. So this was June 2016. He said, I write only to address two misconceptions. I indeed saw a complete film, though temporary music, and I did not describe it as Jerry Lewis doing slapstick in Auschwitz. He was indeed trying to make a serious film, which of course in the Spy magazine, like he was like saying it was like, like,
right.
We have that quote. We know what you said. And then later on, I forgot what I had said there. I think I had replied to him there too. And I called him a liar, basically. But on Twitter, Harry Shearer went off again about the film. And then he said, I never said I saw a completed film. But he just said he saw a complete film.
Yeah, for years. I mean, he was uncontested for many years. No, he didn't think anybody would ever see it, and then suddenly people are seeing it.
Yeah, so
he had to change his story.
And then he also had the nerve to like say that he wasn't even in the Der Clown documentary, which he absolutely was. And I sent him another tweet, and I was like, screenshot, here is your face, here's the IMDb post, like saying that you are in the documentary. Like, here you are, stop lying. And also he was like, it didn't go viral. Like, I don't think, like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. Like, there was no released footage and a thing. I was like, then what is this? I had like brought back on my Vimeo channel like another version of it, and I was like, well, what is this? Here's the whole 30 minutes, and here, and like I showed him different articles. Like, you even commented on the Variety article about it. Here you are. And you want to tell me that you didn't like know anything went viral? Like, that's when you commented in the first place in 2016, and I commented back at you. So you're just lying all around. And it was just, you know, I got blocked after that, but you know, I went out calling him a liar and fighting.
I think Harry's lost it, to be honest.
Yeah, being on The Simpsons for many years, I think we'll do that do that to a man. You know, it's funny. I mean, I probably learned about The Day the Clown Cried from that footage. I had probably heard about it before, you know, didn't really think much of it, and that footage came out. And yeah, I think I probably saw it around the time that it came out. A friend of mine, I think, showed it to me. And you know, it was intriguing. It was very interesting. And then several years later is when I started to look into it more, and, you know, trying to piece together a story, you know, out of all this, which is, you know, impossible. There's, I mean, so many different stories from different people, but absolutely that video went viral. I mean, everybody was talking about it in, you know, in the classic film world, you know, it was a huge thing when that came out.
Yeah, I saw like John Cusack retweeting my video. I was like,
wow.
it was
pretty interesting.
A strange experience, and I did it all inadvertently because it was just released without me. Like, I just meant to have it with fans, and then everybody's now seen it.
It's absolutely the holy grail of filmmaking. Yeah. I mean, you know, everybody wants to see it, and you know, people considered what was the Orson Welles movie that came out recently, that kind of Inherit the Wind. Other Side of the Wind. Other Side of the Wind. I think people. I think that's the one. Yeah, people consider that to be like the holy grail of like, oh, that this movie will never be seen. And I mean, now I think even those filmmakers who put together the edit on the completed edit on Netflix were trying to get The Day the Clown Cried released, and I think went to Jerry and were trying to put that together, and that was unsuccessful. Something like that. But yeah, no, it's I mean, everybody wants to see it. You know, everybody's intrigued by it who loves cinema and loves film, and I certainly am intrigued by it. I just want to know more about every aspect of it. I want to know, you know, Jerry's inner feelings about it. I want to know what the crew and the cast felt about it, because it's just, what a story, you know, and it's continuing. I mean, certainly Richard, with, you know, you interviewing him, and then that was uncompleted. I mean, this is just, it's a cursed film in so many ways.
And what's interesting is the kids, whenever interviewed or tracked down, the kid actors, were they? Do you know of any child actor that was interviewed ever about their experience?
Not that I know of. I don't even know if they're listed. I have a full, it's a complete cast and crew list that I was sent from the Swedish Film Institute, and I don't even think that those actors are listed on there. The names, everybody else is listed on there, every single name, but I don't think any child actors are listed. But it would be very interesting to interview some of those people and get their thoughts and their memories, because I'm sure they're still around.
Yeah,
especially the one that he called a name when he was editing the film.
Shirley Temple. Did
yes,
he call
the
it Shirley Temple?
Well, no, that wasn't the name. That it was the C word.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. That's right. Oh, that came through in that Playboy interview, no? Oh god,
yeah.
That's just
he was just
dark.
because he was so annoyed that they were like looking into the camera, which he probably would have. I don't know. I mean, would he have to reshoot? I mean, it's funny because like he did a literal joke about that in The Errand Boy, where he was like looking, and the director was like, "Who's looking? Who's looking?" And it was, you know, Jerry Lewis's character was like looking into the camera during filming of the scene. So, like the same thing happened to him. What with the child like staring into the screen, like you know, she was. I guess she was, you know, trying to show off in a way, but like I don't know. Of course, I don't know what she was exactly doing, but he was saying that she was trying to be Shirley Temple in Auschwitz.
Yeah. No, I'm looking at the cast and crew list that I have, and there are no names listed of the children. I wonder who they were. I wonder if they were family members of you know, the cast and crew, or if they were, you know, hired. I mean, I'm just I mean I
were
remember,
hired. I think
yeah, probably so.
yeah, I think they were hired. They were child actors, I think, most of them.
Mm-hmm.
Would anyone know that you're in contact with?
Yeah, no, probably not. I mean, I was trying to put together the faces and the names of the cast and crew from behind the scenes photos and just, you know, little snippets, and I sent over a few pictures and some names that I was unsure of to the people that I had spoken to, and they were like, you know, it's so long ago, I really don't remember, you know, and those pictures aren't great. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would imagine if you found one child actor, they might know somebody else who's a child actor, and it might be like a chain reaction, well, you know, at that point, but you'd have to find somebody.
Like the little girl at the end, like that, you know, holds his hand.
Somebody knows. I mean, these people are still, I mean, especially the children, I'm sure many of them are still alive, you know.
Yeah.
Would be curious to know. There's so much to uncover with this. And I mean, it truly, I think it would take a village to get a complete picture of what happened. And I was saying this to Kayley too, that I think to understand, because there's so many conflicting stories of, you know, how Jerry came upon The Day the Clown Cried. I had read somewhere that Jerry had read the script years before. He had been brought the script by Waxberger, and he had turned it down, and then he later on reconsidered it. But that conflicts with different stories.
But he told us that, actually. He told us that.
Oh, that's what he sold. Okay, yeah.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, that's what I had heard as well.
Was
he had turned it down.
I think he said to us he sat on the script for about a decade.
Yeah, right.
Like,
that's what I had heard.
That it was like through Jim Wright, who worked with him on Way Way Out, and like was like a sound engineer or something.
I don't know.
I mean, as far as I remember, he said, "Oh, it's," and I think it's in the trailer we cut. He says, "Oh, the script came on my desk and whatever." I don't know if he gave us the details of who brought the script to him necessarily, but
because guy was.
But he did talk about that.
That guy was going to be the co-producer of the original when it was being done by another guy, and what's his name? I just forgot his name. But yeah, well, Jim Wright was the guy though that
was it Lowell something? I think you did something the name Lowell something. Yeah, I don't know.
You earlier.
Yeah, you did. No, I again, there's so many conflicting stories, and it would be good to get like a timeline of events and kind of suss out, you know, what the truth of it, you know, of the story was, because I think there's a lot of that contradiction. You know, what I would really love to see, and this would be a very difficult thing to find, but I know that Charles Denton's son has a copy or a few copies, would be a script, an original script before Jerry's revisions. I had asked Denton's son, I said, you know, I would love to see it. I would love to read it. And he said, well, I'm not comfortable with that. He said, I know it's worth something. And I think he alluded to the fact that he might want to sell it one day, and it would probably, get a lot of money, and he didn't want to send it to me at the risk that I would leak it or something. And I said, well, no, I said, I'll happily, if you want me to sign an NDA, if you want to send me a, a watermark copy, if, in person, I just would love to see, compare the original script with, the script that Joan and Charles wrote together. And he said, I'll think about it. He said, let me think about it. It's not going to happen. But from what I know of this, I mean, it's hard to know exactly why the script was written in the first place. I mean, Joan O'Brien was not Jewish, had really no connection to the Holocaust, wasn't even a screenwriter, was a publicist. For some reason,
she was basing it on.
But wasn't she a publicist for a famous TV clown or something?
Emmett Kelly.
Clown. Huh?
I think you're right. Yes.
And then and then somehow I don't know how that then morphed into a Holocaust film, but
I think she had read something, or she had something about a clown in the Holocaust, and that kind of got the idea going. And I believe she wrote a script with another writer originally, and then or a couple other writers, and then through Charles Denton was also a publicist, and Charles Denton's wife was on a publicist board, or like a female publicist board with Charles Denton's wife. They had met, and somehow Charles Denton said, I want to write the script with you. And so they rewrote the script together, which is what Jerry ultimately saw and revised himself. But according to Charles Denton's son, I think he might be exaggerating. I think that he might be mistaken, but he said that Jerry never had the rights. He never had the rights. I have a feeling that Waxberger, I think that Waxberger had an option that expired. And
he didn't renew it.
Didn't renew it. Yeah, and that makes sense. That makes more sense to me.
That's right. Jerry wasn't aware.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, he paid a certain amount, Waxberger paid $2,500 or something, but he owed $50,000. So and never paid that, of course.
Right. Well, yeah. There's a period with options, just from my own knowledge of how that works, that an option is a down payment for a complete payment. Eventually, you're just putting down some money to eventually pay for the rights for the entire thing, and probably they couldn't afford that. $2,500 back then was a lot of money for an option. Now that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, that's besides the point. That's besides the point. But yeah, it's crazy. Yes.
Anthony, can you tell us a bit more about what you're planning or hoping to make?
Sure, I'm happy to, because I don't know what it will be, or if it will be anything. But last year, I mean, I don't know even how I came across this idea in my mind, but I've always been fascinated with stories that have been untold, especially connected to the film industry, and I always have wanted to write something, that was almost journalistic in a way. Several years ago, I'll get to the Day of the Clown Cried in a second, but several years ago, I was writing a script, a treatment, an outline on the relationship between Olivia de Havilland and Joan Fontaine, and their relationship, and which had really not been covered completely. And so I met both women, and was interested in knowing more about their lives, and got a lot of great information about that. And that didn't work out. Wanted to do something else in that space about something that had previously not a story that hadn't been told completely. And I had just started working for a film and television development company, which I'm still at today, and looking for new stories and just interesting stories. And I came across The Day the Clown Cried again, and said, God, I would love to do something about that. The film will never be released, but I'd love to do something, where it was like a docudrama, almost like Ed Wood, or just thinking of another example, like Dolomite Is My Name is a recent film that came out about the making of The Day the Clown Cried, and since the film will never be released, would love to see it depicted in some way and recreated, maybe, and an actor playing Jerry Lewis. So I went down this journey of trying to put together some research, and again, I was, came across, these brick walls, and just, big question marks. And of course, came across your terrific trailer. I just was like, oh my God, I want to see that whole thing. Why is there not a completed documentary? And just everything else that I could find on YouTube. But it was clear that Jerry had passed away. It was clear that I would have to look elsewhere. Through Kayley, I saw Your Clown and was fascinated by that, but wanted to know more than that information that was available there. So I began reaching out to people who were involved that I could find names. And I don't know how I found certain, like Mike Ramirza had never previously been interviewed about the day the clown cried. I think I came across his name somewhere. It was an American sounding name. And I thought, oh, great. He's probably somebody I can contact from the Yellow Pages. And I did, I found him. He lives in Los Angeles. Picked up the phone and called and said, I left him a message. I said, I believe you might have been involved in a movie called The Day the Clown Cried. If I'm crazy, then I apologize. But if you were, I would love to talk to you. And he did call me back. And, he said, how did you find me? And he's now also, he's a producer as well. I think he produced, I can't remember the name. I think it's Aquila and the Bee was one of the films that he produced. And he was very willing to talk to me, and then connected to Rune simultaneously. He lives in South Africa. I don't even remember how I got in contact with him. Just a friend of a friend of a friend knew him and got me in touch through an email. And I think what's, for me, the most interesting part of these two people that I had contacted was both of them were the closest people to Jerry at that time. Again, they were the Four Musketeers with Mike's wife and with Fred Skidmore, who's passed away. So it really was great to get inside information from people who were really very close to him at that time. Just kind of hit the jackpot with that. At a certain point, in film, TV development, and especially with changing events in the world, the riots from last year and COVID, it became sort of clear to me that I don't know if there is the interest and the appetite for a story in film or television about this, and to have a character like Jerry leading the way. It's, just from the mandates that we've been seeing from, the major studios and networks, they're looking for diverse lead characters. And this would have to really be a passion project for somebody. And it became clear that this is maybe not the right time to tell this story, but I'm still very interested in pursuing it and finding more information and doing something with it. Hoping that, maybe one day something will come of it, if, in the form of, I don't know, a documentary, a book, and maybe even, a scripted docudrama. That would be ideal, but, hopefully at some point in the future.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of it's very popular with the movies about the making of movies right now, with Hitch and Mank that just came out, with the Orson Welles film, and
I would love to see it. I would love to see something done with it, but maybe one day I have all my notes saved. I had talked to a few writers as well about it, and they were intrigued enough, just because it's, you mentioned The Day the Clown Cried, and people, their ears prick up. But I think at some point it would just have to be everything would have to be synchronistic in some way, and everything would have just come together in the right way. But I'm going to sit on it for a little while longer and see if anything does come of it.
So I was looking at my other things that have not been ever talked about. Do we know why Jeanne Moreau, she was considered for the lead for Jerry's wife in the film, and then I have a interview that Jeanne and Jerry did together, where she was looking at
all of Jerry's like, drawings and like the photos of the actors and like the designs for like the costumes and like the sets and everything he wanted. And she was like very intrigued by it and like was telling him like that he did like a really great job basically, and was very had a lot of attention to detail in his planning, and which always like makes me like think that like even though he was on Percodan and like he couldn't remember stuff and like says that he wasn't focused, he was always like really focused in the pre-production and like even the production. Of course he did let things slip, but he was always really, at the top of his game with those aspects. So I mean, I don't know. It could be that he let the film slip a little, but I mean, to me, it seems one of his best works. Like,
Could have been.
Like, well, of course, like, the cinematography is like a lot different. It's a lot more European, of course. And I mean, just that just makes it look, a lot better.
To address your Jean Moreau question, I could be creating this from just what I believe I read or heard was that the role was too small for her, because I think that character is only in the beginning of the film, if I'm not mistaken. That it wasn't a big enough role for her to sink her teeth into. I think it was like one or two scenes. I mean, they may have been poignant scenes, but it wasn't enough for her to. I could be wrong. I don't know if anybody else has heard of me differently.
And Harriet Anderson, who ended up playing his wife, found Jerry very strange, and of course she didn't get paid. She still wants to get paid, or like,
she's the one who speaks out against the movie.
Yeah. She's the one of all the crew that was like, he was weird, and I hated this film, like being on it or whatever. And so there's that. But I don't know what. I would be really interested to know what happened with Jean Moreau, because she seemed really interested in it, and I don't know if that was after like she was considered, or
Yeah, I don't know about that. What's the footage from that where's that from? Is that from one of those pre-production TV specials from Belgium or something? One of those things?
Yeah, it was like I think it was the Ina place again. I've been but this one was very special. Like the other one I got was from a DVD in Germany, so I had to like send for it overseas, and it was on one of their like specials where they had just a bunch of different interviews with different actors, and so I had to have that translated. I had to have this one translated. So that was a lot of work. But yeah, like I mean, also, I found out that there was like another actress considered for some role. It didn't say whether it was the wife role, but she like refused to like sleep in the same room as I don't even know. That's would be really weird, but like it said like she refused to sleep in the same room that Jerry would be staying in. Like what?
I don't know. That's
and then she left the production the next day. So
it would have to be the wife role, because I can't think of any other female roles in the movie.
Yeah, so I don't know what happened there. If like she thought Jerry was trying to sleep with her, or he was trying to sleep with her. Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows who it was? Like, I don't know what was going on there.
I mean, I think you can't extricate from the original story the mythology around all of this. And the mythology is as interesting as the potential It's probably maybe more
Yeah.
interesting. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Oh, absolutely. That's what I mean makes it so intriguing.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. And there's so many
That's right.
stories too. I mean, and things that we'll never know. There was, I mean, I don't know how if I should be even talking about this, but there was some article I was reading about the day the clown cried, and I think it was from a Swedish paper, and they were talking about how Jerry had this assistant named Tina, I believe. And it was a very special assistant that was very close to a very young woman. And I asked the people that I spoke to, about somebody named Tina, if they remembered a Tina, and they said yes, but out of respect for Jerry, we will not address that question. So it's a big point or anything, but there's secrets about this movie that will never ever be uttered by the answer will never be
down
uttered by anyone.
Tina.
Let's find Tina. I want to find Tina. That'll solve all the questions about the day the clown cried is Tina.
Tina has the truth to everything.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's so many stories.
Did you send me this article? I don't remember that at all.
I don't think so. I have to find it. I don't even know if I have. I probably do. I'll send it. I'll send it to you if I can find it. But it was a translated article. Yeah. There's a lot of stories. I mean, the guys that I interviewed have really great memories, things that I haven't even shared, on this call. And maybe a long form interview or conversation, we can go into all their points. But really interesting, really interesting. But they loved Jerry. They truly loved him and have the utmost. Even still, I mean, Rune remembered that Jerry called him his number one on set. He said, "You're my number one," and Rune would call him the governor. Rune, I think the last time he saw Jerry, because nobody really stayed in touch. I think the last time he said he saw Jerry was, I think he went to Vegas in 1992 or 1993 and went to a taping of the Telethon, and they had a nice reunion then. But yeah, nobody really stayed in touch with Jerry. I think, I mean, that I know of, and Mike Ramirez said Rune hadn't talked in many years, probably since they wrapped production, and I was happy to reconnect them at some point. So anyway, that's all I was saying.
We just remembered something, that one of the ideas we had for the doco was that we would bring together Spielberg and Jerry in a conversation, because they both had a similar, Spielberg was his student, and also they both tried to tackle the Holocaust in different ways, but
in similar ways, in that they both departed from their usual formulas in tackling the Holocaust. I mean, Spielberg did a pretty big 180 with Schindler's List, and and Jerry was going to do an even bigger turn, I think, compared to his previous work. The mission in trying to get in contact with Spielberg was a huge effort that we eventually succeeded. We eventually got a letter to him, and a response came from a guy named Marvin Levy, who was one of the top executives at DreamWorks, who was also Spielberg's kind of marketing and publicity guy from way back, stretching way back to Schindler's List and maybe before Schindler's List. And the response was written by Marvin, but explaining what Spielberg had said, which was, as much as he supports the project and loves Jerry and all that nice stuff, he said, ultimately it's a decision for Jerry to make. Because what we didn't explain was, what we were really asking for was to Spielberg to help us in bringing Jerry back to saying yes to the whole documentary, because this was at a point where he was quite definitively saying no for a while, although eventually he did say yes again. But this was during a long patch where he was saying no. And so there was the idea to have Spielberg in the documentary in a nice sequence with the two of them and maybe comparing notes and chatting and whatever. But it was also for Spielberg, and also I guess in a way it was like there'd be some real cachet there for Jerry if Spielberg was in the documentary. And anyway, it didn't work out. But I had about 3 or 4 long phone calls with this Marvin Levy guy, basically begging him and saying, "Come on, you know, it's going to be such an amazing documentary." And it was so lovely, and he always took my calls, even though I was just hassling him for the same thing over and over again. He knew why I was calling, but he would still take my calls and chat and say, "Look, just, you know, you've got to understand how busy someone like Stephen is," and blah blah blah. So,
God, that would have been amazing. That would have been incredible. I mean, did people not see the potential?
I know.
I know.
It would have been so cool.
Good look. I mean, I want to know, is this thing cursed, this movie? I mean, there's something around this, even trying to get us on a conversation together, the Wi-Fi is so screwed up. So Jerry is doing something up there. I'm telling you, he doesn't want us to be talking about this.
Yeah, well, that's right.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that even in the afterlife, he was controlling things.
I think so.
The other thing I wanted to tell you guys was that after the German documentary came out, the last ditch effort we made was that we rejigged the documentary pitch to be focused only on Jerry's pre-production journey with The Day the Clown Cried, as opposed to the film itself, because there were 2 very full-on stories he told us about when we met him about his pre-production period. And one was that he tracked down and lined up a meeting with an actual gas chamber attendant, an actual SS gas chamber attendant, which you may have read somewhere as well about. I don't know how well documented that is, but he didn't go into huge detail, but I can't remember. What did he? I mean, he said it was an incredible.
He said it was incredible, and then the guy ended up being his driver.
No, that was another guy.
Wasn't that him?
That was a separate guy. I'm pretty sure that was a different. Yeah, no, that was another guy that was in the Hitler Youth, and it was.
Oh yeah.
There were 2. There were 2. That's based on the gas chamber SS guy and this other guy that drove Jerry around for the whole production and pre-production. We thought there's a story there, you know, in terms of and the Jewish identity thing as well, because I think this driver, and also the thing was the driver. Yeah, no, Jerry had a lot to say about him. They became good friends. Very close friends, and
wow.
This guy was obviously, you know, in the Hitler Youth and was indoctrinated and whatever, but had anyway. So that was the last attempt at communicating with Jerry, but to be honest, we never heard back from him.
Wow, what a shame.
I know, yeah. And then he died.
He died
not long after that. But
like it's interesting that like he was just like being a Jewish person, like that he was so open to seeing the struggles that the German people also went through and being like indoctrinated. And
it's exactly what he said.
Yeah, he was all about forgiveness though as well.
He was, and and also he did have a more broad, universal humanitarian approach, because when we started rolling with the camera and interviewed him, we didn't want to jump straight into The Day the Clown Cried, so we kind of warmed up with questions about his Jewishness, his Jewish identity, and he really, yes, you know, he was proud to be Jewish, but he also really said, I don't go out of my way to find out, is this person Jewish? Is that person Jewish? I don't need that. I don't have to have that affinity with someone. He really was about the human being and the experience with the person.
Yeah. I read or I heard in I think in the Der Clown documentary that he and that the gas chamber attendant had spoke for 13 hours straight during their first meeting. Pretty amazing. And he forgave him for, just I guess on behalf of all Jewish people for, what he had done. And I mean, but yeah, I think that's my God, what a story. Just that in itself is just such a point of this.
Wasn't
know?
the guy asking him for forgiveness too? Like the other guy was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I think I recall him saying that.
Maybe,
Yeah.
We've
That'll
got-
be in our
We've got to
transcripts,
go
I
over the
think.
notes.
We'll go over the notes.
Get the footage
Yeah.
transcribed properly. Yeah.
But that's what a beautiful point of the story. And it's something that, when people look at the surface of the film and they make jokes about, how it's the worst film that was never made or whatever they say about it, they don't understand the depth of, of things like that, and that, I think that's such an important part of the story. I mean, truly what he was attempting to do and what he was aspiring to do with this is vastly overlooked. I think that's a part of the story that's not usually told,
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's why we kind of thought the preparation for such a film, the emotional preparation could have been a really good story in itself.
Sure. And the physical transformation that he had to undergo as well. He lost, I don't even remember how much weight he lost in preparation for the film. And very interesting.
It seems to me like, because I had heard like people said that critiques about like, it might have been Harry Shearer, but it was also the other guy who let Harry Shearer see it, supposedly, if you believe that he even saw the film. But like they said that he had the slick black hair.
And that's not even true when you see the footage.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's completely gray. And then, but it's also, I was reading that same comment from the guy, and I wonder if he was meaning like that Jerry's usual characters are like that. Maybe his thing was taken out of context to what he was actually saying in general about Jerry's characters, which is true. Like he plays these, he said that he plays these schlubs, but basically he's always having the slick black hair. So I think he was more over talking about his normal characterizations as opposed to the Day the Clown Cried.
Perhaps about the scenes that were shot in France, at the circus, because I seem to recall that his hair was like slicked back and black in those scenes from what I'd seen, but I could be wrong.
I mean, he's still, it's more that, but like he still has like gray in it, and I mean, but that would make sense that he had his hair like that then. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but like the rest of the scenes, like appropriate. I remember like the shoe thing. That Joan O'Brien said he has new shoes on in a concentration camp.
That's something that Charles Denton's son recalled as well, was the shoes. They were all upset about the shoes, that they were brand new. that was one of the points that they focused on. Yeah, why in a concentration camp would they be wearing brand new shoes?
I mean, but like in old Hollywood, like a lot of like the realness and dirt and grit wasn't always there, like that would be there, if these people really went through these things.
I mean, I think the story was more important than the shoes.
You'd hope so.
I mean, crazy, just crazy.
Yeah, I think they just wanted to find something wrong with it, as opposed to, because they were already just pissed off. So
they were very upset, and they went to their graves upset, and too bad. Again, I would love to read their original draft and see if it was any better. I mean, they claimed that it was this masterpiece before Jerry got his hands on it, so I would love to see that. That's the truth. I have a feeling it probably wasn't.
It's a big claim from two people that were not even screenwriters to say it was a masterpiece.
Exactly.
More myth.
I mean, Denton's son, who you talked about, he's probably got a point in terms of the value of that original script.
Yeah.
You would think it would be quite. I mean, I don't know. Is he tried to get it published?
No.
Sitting on it.
Well, he has. I mean, he has no ownership over it either. I mean, the rights were sold off years ago.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, he's just thinking if he puts that up for auction, he may have other drafts too, but if he puts that up for auction, that it
the
would
actual script itself, you mean?
exactly that
Yeah.
it would fetch a good price, and he's probably right. But you know, I think it's rather selfish, and you know, there you go. That's my opinion. You know, but yeah, he's pissed off at Jerry on behalf of his father, and I suppose I understand. But there's certainly I mean, with this story, there's about 15 different sides to the story. So I'd love to hear, Nat Waxberger's son is an executive at Lionsgate. I'm a little intimidated to contact him, and especially I would love to hear what Waxberger's perspective is, what he thinks about his father's involvement. But yeah, people are pretty tight-lipped about it because as people have told me, this is a very emotional topic for me. We don't and as you experienced with Jerry, a very emotional topic. You'd think that I don't know, I understand why, but you'd think people would finally want to set the record straight, and some people have. So hopefully we'll get the full story at some point.
Jerry was pretty he was pretty angry at Waxberger, like even now.
He called him a Nazi.
Called him a Nazi, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
The Nazi Waxberger, that's right. That's how you refer to it.
Yeah, I can understand why he was upset with them.
Yeah.
I mean, completely lied to him every step of the way, and he was a total scumbag. So I mean, that's totally valid. But
like I told Anthony, like I think it would be a good idea to like have everybody's point of view in a movie.
Yeah.
Like it just like there's quite a few movies. I mean, I don't know about quite a few, but like at least some that are like very interesting is like everybody's point of view and the chaos and like just the differing.
It's very Rashomon, if anybody gets that reference.
Rashomon, yes.
Very what?
Rashomon.
Oh, Rashomon. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people to talk to, that's for sure. I mean,
and if they're around, and this is my mentality is if they're around and they're willing to speak, get them while you can, and I've been doing my part, and there are people that I've reached out to who haven't gotten back to me, and I understand. And there are, more people that I'm looking to contact, but it's as you know, it's hard to get back into it once you've been in it and really, put your heart and soul into it. Then you step out of it. It's hard to get back into it, and put that emotion into it, especially from your perspective. I mean, you really, worked your asses off for years to get Jerry, and that must have been a very traumatic experience to not see that.
Well, it was 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, it was. I mean, in the end,
it was a roller coaster.
It was weird. It was kind of almost a relief and like total grief at the same time.
Wow.
Because we kind of lived this, roller coaster for years with him.
I think we also got philosophical as well, which was in that realizing that the trajectory of our documentary had the same fate as the day the clown. It was kind of destined to be this incomplete, messy, partially made thing.
But his last communication with us was very it was very sensitive and very vulnerable. It was very moving, actually. What do you remember?
Every time he did a departure letter, it was very, because there were 2 or 3, and the final one was the same. It was even more final, I guess. Yeah, he always had respect for us, and because we were always respectful to him, and like I said, from the beginning we always kept that consistent message of that we just want you to be able to tell your story, and we want people to be able to know it and leave a positive legacy of what you tried to do something. It may have failed for whatever reasons, multiple reasons, but you had a really good intention, with that film.
I said a similar thing to Charles Denton's son, that, because he was pissed off that, something could have come of this film, and instead it was nothing. And I said, well, with what I was attempting to do, I said, wouldn't it be nice to finally give your father and everybody involved their day in the spotlight, after all those years of upset and anger, finally put their name out there and give them the credit that they deserve. And he said, yeah, I guess. Didn't buy it, but I do feel that way. And I feel that, and I think I said the same thing to Rune, is, as emotional as it was, wouldn't it be nice to finally, give you guys the credit for all the work that you did? And like I said, in some way, I hope that that can finally be achieved. I don't know how, and I don't know when it will be, but hopefully there will be something that comes out that finally gives people the credit that they deserve on all their hard work on this,
Yeah, because all those actors and actors, like, well, more actors actually, but they like really felt like they did such a good job on this film, and they longed for the time where it would be released, and just nothing came, and there, it just took a lot out of them too, that they, weren't able to have their good work shown and what they believed was a good film. And I want to know what you guys think of, like, do you think the little bits of comedy that were inserted in the film, obviously the film is almost all dramatic, but the little pieces of comedy, both in the script and what we've seen from the actual footage, do you think that's like misplaced, or is it about right? Like, because I know people usually criticize this in the script. Apparently there's like a scene where he goes to like go to the bathroom, takes a pee, and it's like ice cubes because it's like so cold or something, and people like criticize that moment, which he would later do that very joke in his film Cracking Up.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say without seeing it in context.
Right.
And there's I mean, you can read it in a script, but it's hard to judge that. Really, I can't say. I'm inclined, just from what I have seen, to say that, it seems like this, what I have seen of the comedic bits, the only one that I can remember is the part where he's doing something with a walrus, a roll stick. Yeah. And it seems endearing, seems sweet. It seems like he's doing that for the kids, and there's something childlike about it. But I mean, that alone is the only one that I can think of. The rest of it, it's hard to say. It's hard to say if it would have worked or not. I mean, I think Jerry was a good filmmaker, and he would have found a way to make it work. But other than that, I can't say. I have no idea.
I mean, personally, I think the ice cube thing would have worked. The one that was later that was odd to me was the actually, I don't think it seemed like he didn't film it, was when they were actually inside the gas chamber or about to go in or something, and he was like doing tricks for them to like keep them
Juggling.
Like their focus on that instead of what was happening to them. So he was like doing all those like tricks and stuff. That was in the script, but it didn't seem like he filmed that, if that was indeed the ending what we saw. So I think it should just ended like how we just saw, like with the door closing and
the door closing. Yeah, no, I think Anthony's right. It's hard without the full proper soundtrack and the complete edit, proper editing, and it's very hard to know the tone of those moments, or whether they would have fallen flat or been embarrassing but yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, he was a master filmmaker. I mean, I can't imagine he'd allow, although he did say to us his ego got in the way.
That's it. I was just going to say, maybe he could help himself. That's who he was known for, so to bring that persona in.
This is a very interesting project for him as well, is that he didn't have, I mean, he wouldn't have had a studio like Paramount over him and supervising the edit. And, he was doing this not independently per se, but, he didn't have that Hollywood studio over him calling the shots. So it's hard to say what he would have come up with on his own anyways. I don't know.
I know he was like happy that like he could do like anything he wanted basically. And like people would come and give him things like whatever he wanted, they were going to do for him.
Yeah.
On that film?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember him telling us that he approached all the major American studios.
Right.
And they were all like, they didn't want to touch it. It was just like, nah, Holocaust. And he just said, he goes, chicken shit. What did he say? Chicken shit prick. They just said they were all just petrified, which is why he turned to Europe.
I think that's in the teaser. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
And then he says, and that made me more determined
to do it. Yeah.
Sure.
Like an early film that comes to mind that somewhat, let's see, is it named The Juggler? It's with Kirk Douglas, and it was in the 50s, where he was, let's see, I think that's the name. Yes, The Juggler, 1953. Like he's a concentration camp inmate, but he just got out of the concentration camp, so he's immigrating to Israel, and then he has psychological problems, and like he was a juggler, he's an entertainer, and so that was something on the cusp of.
Yeah, I think that there were several films that danced around the idea of the Holocaust, but I could be wrong about this, but I think that this would have been the first film, at least American film, and it really wasn't even an American film, to take place in a concentration camp.
Let alone with the gas chambers
certainly
and
that.
And children.
And then children on top of that.
Absolutely.
Definitely the American film. I think it's called Kepo. It's with what's her name? I think it's Susan Strasberg.
Oh, interesting. Well, I think that raises another interesting question, is that after he completed Clown, let's say if he had completed Clown, I wonder how he would have gotten it distributed in the United States. If they all had already, I mean, maybe he was hoping that if he had made the film and showed it to the studios, that he would change their mind. That they would see this beautiful piece and they'd say, "Oh, we have to distribute this."
Yeah.
Maybe that was the thought process, because I can't imagine how that would have worked out.
No.
Oh, I just think of him on the Dick Cavett show, spruiking it.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
And the Tonight Show, and and all these other, and as like there was like her name is Bobby Wygant. He was saying that it was coming out, and that's where he talks about David Hartman being on the set and filming some scene, like some behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
And apparently that's out there. And I think when David Hartman hosted, he showed some behind the scenes footage on the Tonight Show. And because people have been saying that for years, that they remember that. So that's something that I want to find.
No, I know that would be great to track down.
Both that and the Annette Wolff documentary. That's what I need to find. So that whole
there's bits of that though, no?
It's like it's like a 53-minute like documentary all on the set footage of
because she wasn't she famous for doing she did a series of American celebrities,
Yeah.
like big actors. Jerry just being one of them, but
Yeah, I believe so.
And
Yeah.
someone on the old Jerry Lewis forum like said that they had seen that when it was like shown screened somewhere. I forget where it was screened, but they saw it, and then like it was the scene. One of the scenes that they focused on was where the guy gets shot and the whole like prison yard scene.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was very emotional, that scene, for everybody, and they just like broke down, both from the production and from what they had, you know, just witnessed in the scene. So it was a very powerful moment there. Yes, I just looked up the capo thing. So like that was from 1960, and that was like a Jewish teenager is sent to a concentration camp with her parents, and then she like has to she basically becomes like the warden, the capo of the thing, and like turns in other fellow Jews to live basically, and she gets, you know, has to sleep with the German guards, and you know, it's
wow, and it's
very,
1960. 1960.
Wow.
yeah, that's an Italian film
Oh,
Okay.
with so Susan Strasberg
Look that up.
is in that. Yeah, I've seen that I think like twice, and that was pretty stuff.
yeah.
Usually the Europeans weren't afraid to go there, whereas Americans,
Yeah. It's taboo. It still is
yeah,
in a lot of ways.
I just don't understand like when people are like so mortified that this is like such a bad idea for a film. I just don't. I don't know. It always just seemed like a great idea for a film. I don't know.
I think it's because it was Jerry.
Yeah.
And no one could separate the fact that, you know, he was this slapstick humor, and that they couldn't, people malfunctioned with the combination of that. And, you know, even though he was obviously not, well, that's one of the misconceptions still. When you go on the internet, it says it's a Holocaust comedy, and it's never was, and it's never was. What was that?
Yeah, and like I think it wasn't that part of like Harry Shearer what he said, and then he said like I never said it was a comedy, like like and anyone who could like read the script or like see the film now, like in the pieces that it's in, like
clearly not a comedy at all.
No, not even a dark comedy.
Which was, okay, so that puzzled me a little bit, because like I know Jerry said it's not a comedy, but then in the Der Clown documentary he said, where's the comedy? I couldn't find comedy. So that was a little
I know, that's a weird, I remember that.
So I'm like, but then he was like saying that the comedy was there if you look for it.
All right. Maybe it was
one of his philosophical moments that is like
who knows?
Either we just don't get it, or he doesn't get it himself. I don't know.
It was a senior moment.
Could unless he was having some philosophical, statement about, the world is I don't even want to make that statement. The world is a comedy, and
well, because he was
bizarre.
He was saying that like even at a funeral there is comedy.
Oh, right. He did say that, didn't he?
Yeah.
You're right. You can find the comedy in a funeral. I do remember him saying that.
You can find comedy everywhere.
There's, of course, there's the comedic undertone of the clown character, but it just has a different meaning. It's not a slapstick piece.
No.
But I understand. In a way, I understand what he's saying. I can't articulate exactly, what that is, but I understand. I think Chekhov's The Seagull, which is not a comedy, is billed as a comedy. A human comedy or something like that, just because of the absurdity
of the human relationships. And maybe that's what he was trying to go for. Maybe that's what he's talking about, just the absurdity of, the Holocaust and just, of that whole situation. Certainly it's not a comedy, but I'm trying to justify his point a little, and I don't know if I'm doing a good job, but trying to give him some credit.
Well, we're almost out of time.
Yeah. You guys should sleep. No?
Any parting?
Yeah, I gotta sleep.
Any
parting thoughts? Well, actually, I did want to just quickly ask you, Kayley, what is it still available somewhere on the internet? What you put together, the footage that you extracted from the doco, and then you
So that's still on Vimeo not under the title directly, but yeah, it's on my Vimeo channel.
What's your Vimeo channel again? Because I know your YouTube channel, but I don't know your Vimeo channel.
K Brown.
Brown.
Kay and then Brown.
Okay.
So I think it's on public though. I think it's still on public, but yeah.
All right.
My parting thoughts are let's get this film released and let's do all the work we can to do it. And let's find Tina. I want to find Tina.
Right. Find Tina. And come on, you're in Hollywood. Can't you get Dan Hartman? What's his name? David Hartman.
David Hartman. He's
still around. I know he's old.
For many years. I would love to. And I tried to track down, I think he lives in Nevada. I'm pretty sure he lives in Nevada, but he's been retired for many, many years. I'll do my best. I'll try to find him.
I messaged Kayley about it the other day. I mean, it's either that Jerry's got it locked up in his archive, which might be released when they release that other stuff, Library of Congress, or someone's at our door. Or Hartman has a copy as well. Who knows?
I'll do my darndest.
Okay.
If you tell me what to say, I'll try. Because I have a feeling he's gonna, even if he's, he has his faculties and he's with it. I don't know if he would be willing to share, but you never know. You never know. If anybody can do it, it's the two of you. I mean, truly, if you could get as far as you got with Jerry, I think you could probably do anything. So I'll get the contact. I'll leave it to you to do the execution.
I'll get the footage somewhere.
And Kayley, get the footage and leak it online. And it'll become viral, and we'll all get in trouble. Get sued.
Charles Denton's son will be yelling about something.
Well, he's a lawyer too, so he'll yeah, he's a lawyer.
Oy.
So there you go.
All right, guys, it's almost about to end.
It's about to cut off.
We will transcribe our interview and send you both.
All right.
Yeah.
Would love that. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks.
It's been a pleasure.
Take care.
You take care.
Bye.
Bye.